But we're in a tie match. Good. All right.
Right.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to Get Money Smart at Lindenwood. If this is your first time, well, then welcome. Glad to see lots of faces here and online. We've got a treat for you today. Just a few little housekeeping things. If you're in the room, feel free to grab snacks and all. This is our last event for Get Money Smart this year. So thanks for everybody who's participated. I think it's been a fantastic lineup. You still have a little time, even though the month's about out. This is part of the overall Money Smart Month financial literacy initiative that's happening all around St. Louis that we've been a part of in lots of ways. About 2 weeks ago, I was at the zoo for an event that had around 400 people attend. So that was a fantastic thing. So you can go to Money Smart St. Louis, check out all the kind of happenings there. If you've never done this, for you students, if you could take this little financial literacy quiz, it's no big deal. It just gives us a taste for kind of where people are. That would be awesome. And I'll give out a little plug as over the course of this series, if this is topics you're interested in, want to learn more about yourself, increase your comfort level, knowledge, common sense economics, the practical personal finance badge is an awesome resource. It's completely free and self-guided and all of that. So just grab the QR code. This stuff can be up online. And without further ado, we'll turn it over for lots of time so we can take advantage of all the time that we have. Dr. Faruqi is here. She's chair of the finance department, for those that don't know that. And she's going to talk about the role of financial activism. So I'm excited to kind of learn a lot more about this. And just remember, students, if you're getting extra credit or some kind of other incentive, stay tuned at the end because we'll have the QR code for the survey that you need to complete. So if you're online, make sure you're checking that out, okay, as well. So don't disappear early. All right.
Awesome. Okay. All right. Well, Mr. Grant took a couple of lines off the beginning of my presentation. This is the last presentation. I'm Dr. Faruqi, for those of you who do not know. I teach finance and I scare a couple of students away. That's my job.
With your look.
With my what? With my look. Yeah, we talked about this last night. I apparently look scary. Yeah, tell me about it. So let's talk about financial activism and its role in shaping our world that we live in, right? Where do I start? How much of this did Grant take? I'm curious, before I get started, how many of you are on TikTok? Oh,
Vaguely.
Vaguely? All right, so I'm just going to skip that whole first part. I was going to ask you how many of you are on the financial activism side. So I have hashtag let them eat cereal. I put that up there for a purpose, and I'll talk about that a little bit later, I guess, since none of y'all are on TikTok, apparently. Okay, so
We're not falling into your China trap.
What was that? What was that?
So we're not falling into your China trap.
Brainwashed. All right. All right, what is financial activism, right? So financial activism actually has multiple different forms. It depends on your investments level, how much are you invested into the market, as well as your income level. So there's different ways you can be financially active. So some of the ways you can be financially active is through shareholder activism. And this is the way you can engage with corporations, either through shareholder resolution or through proxy voting. You can make them do what you want them to do if you have deep enough pockets. Then you have impact investing. This is investing with the intention to create a positive change, positive environmental or social change based on the way you invest in different companies. So you steer away from companies that do not align with your ethical principles. Followed by divestment campaigns. This is reverse of investing. Instead of investing, you divest. So any companies that do not align with your social and ethical principles, you divest from them, and then you encourage other people to divest from them as well. So for divestment campaigns, you need more courage than money because it could get dangerous with divestment campaigns. Consumer boycott campaigns, this is an easier one, especially in the age of TikTok and social media. You can create a huge movement as long as you can go viral, right? So with consumer boycott campaigns, that's actually targeting companies that do not align with your social moral values. I'm going to take a deeper dive into this a little bit. I'm going to talk about individual type of activism and what it has already done in the landscape of Really that bad? My bad. Sorry.
It's not
I
you,
should-
it's the person.
It's okay. I'll tell you the numbers. So we're going to talk about the landscape of what financial activism has already done in our society. So when it comes to shareholder activism, we have actually seen an increase in shareholder activism, especially in the European and Asian market. However, we took a slight dip in the Northern American market, but overall, globally, we have had 252. That's the number right up there, Rob.
Thank you.
Okay, awesome. All right, 252 shareholder campaigns so far. And the target for these campaigns can vary. It could be for social justice causes, and it could be as simple as there's an agency problem, managers are not doing enough to create returns that we would like to see, and we're going to step in and make sure we align those interests there.
Can we interrupt you along the way?
Sure.
So is there a central entity that's tracking this sort of thing?
So this was, right? You can't.
I can't read that.
You know what? I'll give you my sources after the presentation because I can't read that out of here. But I have them in my notes. I'll give you those sources. So yes, there is a central agency or research groups that do track these shareholder activism.
So what, just out of curiosity, just to follow up on your question, what constitutes a campaign, an act of
A
shareholder?
campaign, it has to be shareholder driven, obviously, and they have to try to either through resolution or trying to get proxy votes and get other shareholders within that company to come together to either, if you're taking my next slide away, to either gain seats on the board or to direct the way that the company is going or through providing resolutions. And
So
I'll
this is
give-
something that's very, very organized. It's just not
Yes.
some people on TikTok,
No,
as you say, just
no.
complaining about.
No, that's the consumer boycott.
Okay.
And we'll get to that as well. So there's some of that as well. So here's a couple of examples of actual shareholder activism that has occurred, and they have brought about a change. The very first one, I'm not going to talk about all of them, obviously. There's hundreds. So we'll just give a quick few examples. There's Engine Number One. That is a hedge fund company. It's a hedge fund that won 2 seats on Exxon's board of trustees, where they have 12 members. So, you know, they got a little foothold. And the cool thing about Engine One is they weren't a major shareholder. It's not like they owned 20% of the company, 10% of the company. No, they only owned 0.02% of the ownership. The way they were successful to achieve these, you know, gain these 2 seats is by getting other shareholders. That's where my next slide was going. They got other shareholders to come on board. I believe it was, this is where I need my notes. Give me 1 second. I'll give you the exact names. It was California State Teachers Retirement, U.S. Pension Funds, and BlackRock. They got them on board to get a better foothold, and then they gained those 2 seats. And the reasons they wanted the seats is because they, in the whole climate change issue, they wanted Exxon to shift more towards renewable energy and low carbon energy. And by getting those seats on the board, they are able to force the company into that direction. Next, we have Arjuna Capital and Sister of St. Francis, Philadelphia. They did a shareholder resolution with Microsoft over gender equality, gender pay equality. And they pushed Microsoft to, one, show their data on gender gap, and then take actions towards bridging that gap, in addition to take on more diversity and inclusion issues as well. So they wanted to see more diversity in the leadership level. So, and they achieved that through this resolution, shareholder resolution. Third, we have Third Point. Third Point shareholders went after Nestle's to reduce their environmental footprint, and they got them to go 100% renewable and reusable packaging, as well as commit to 100%. What was that? No, to reduce their greenhouse emissions. They set some serious targets. Now, whether or not they're going to meet that, that again goes back to how insistent are the shareholders in their push towards the company. Last example I'm going to give is the Humane Society OBS. They went after McDonald's. If you don't know what McDonald's is, it's a giant fast food company. They went after McDonald's because of their animal cruelty practices. So apparently they were using gestational crates for piggies, pregnant piggies, and they were cramping these little pregnant piggies up. So this association went after them to say, hey, you need to stop doing this. This is animal cruelty.
When you say these actions were taken, what levers are actually being used, against these companies to make them take the action? Because in your first example that you cited, you said that they had 0.02% ownership. They gained a couple of seats on the board. So what levers are they actually using to affect this
So
change?
once you have enough shareholders get to vote in board members.
Right.
So if they 0.02, you don't have enough power to actually vote in the board members. But when you get additional shares.
You're saying they persuaded a lot more shareholders.
They persuaded a lot more shareholders, and through that, they were able to vote. So the proxy votes, when you own shares, you'll get emails, right, from companies saying, hey, this vote is coming up. A lot of us, guilty, well, delete. What's my 10 share vote actually going to do? But what these companies do, hedge funds and companies that are actually going after the corporations, they will go after these individual people and collect all these proxy votes so they can be a block vote. So that's how they achieve their goals. All right. So we got on shareholder activism, and they have achieved a lot towards animal cruelty, gender inequalities, impact on environmental controls. They have done a lot, and there's a lot more as well that shareholder activism has done. But I have like 20 more minutes. So I'm gonna move on to impact investing. Impact investing it started back like in the 1960s, but it has looked different over time, and it means different things to different investors. So overall, the overarching thing is socially responsible investments, and it's geared towards social values. So to make our society better. One of the ways this investment has evolved is through ESG, environmental, social, and corporate governance. So companies are now being scored on these 3 pillars, and those scores are publicly available in financial databases. So if a company that you want to invest in, you can go into a database like Morningstar and look up their scores on these 3 factors, and you can determine whether or not you want to invest in this company. Then we have faith-based driven. We got all 3 Abrahamic religions represented in this. Beyond these 3 religions, I didn't find a lot of faith-based investment, and they kind of mimic each other. So the Jewish funds, they tend to focus on environmental issues, local and global, what was that word I'm looking for? Local and global social justice issues. With Christian faiths, they lean towards avoiding companies with abortion, pornography, even some of them even go as far as avoiding alcohol or gambling or potential addictions. The most restrictive one happens to be mine. So they avoid a lot of things. We avoid a lot of things. Speculation trading, interest-based trading, so the entire bond market is out the door. Financial institutions are out the door. And going back to the same as Christian faith, alcohol, gambling, addictive stuff like smoking, defense pork, all of that out the door. So if any of you know what my investment looks like, this is why my investments look like the way they do. All right, moving on to the next one, I'm going to talk a little bit more about divestment campaigns and consumer boycotts, because a lot more people can get involved in this. It doesn't require deep pockets, and as I said, it just involves a little bit of courage and getting people to follow you on things like TikTok. This is where people get to complain. So divestment campaigns, I'm going to talk about 4 main campaigns, starting with the fossil fuel divestment campaign. This campaign was led by a group called 350.org, and their goal is to get institutions to divest from fossil fuel companies, basically. The cool thing about divestment campaigns, a lot of these are led by students at universities to get their universities to divest their endowment funds. A lot of universities have really large endowment funds, kind of like ours. So if you get universities to divest from their funds, you're going to have a major impact on the industries and companies. All right, so fossil fuels, they got a lot of universities to divest from fossil fuels. It was the University of California system and the Rockefeller brothers. They got the movement got those big entities to divest from fossil fuels, which had a big impact. The next one is, this is a little bit newer, the weapons manufacturing. This one is led by Code Pink organization. Again, the same storyline, try to get universities, institutions to divest their funds from weapons manufacturers. Now, the results on this one is still mixed, since it is a little bit early on. Some universities have divested from weapons manufacturers, while others have resisted from The newest kid on the block is a prison industrial complex. So this one was led by students, I believe. Yeah. This one was led by students to get institutions to divest from any companies that profit from mass incarceration, right? This is for social justice issues because of racial issues, how the mass incarceration is focused on minority groups. So the students are leading this campaign to get universities to divest from any companies profiting from this. The most famous one, this is not a new one. This is back in the 1980s, 1908. This is before my time. So no, actually, I was 3. So I just aged myself. All right. So anti-apartheid. What was that?
I said, thanks, make me feel old. I remember this.
That's how I feel when I talk about the financial crisis. I talk about like, you don't know this? They were 3 when this happened. So anti-apartheid divestment in South Africa. This was led again by students. Initially, there was a lot of opposition by universities to divest from companies that were invested in South Africa. Eventually, the universities came around. I believe it was Hampshire University back in 1988. That was the first university to divest, and over the next few years, over 155 universities started divesting their endowments from the companies. And because the companies felt this pressure, over the next 5 years, in that 5-year period, over 200 companies divested out of South Africa. This was a blow of about $1 billion. Yeah, it was a blow of about $1 billion on the South African economy, where they just saw this flood of divestment happening from investors, from companies, from funds, and all of that stuff. Eventually, the whole system became unsustainable. And because of that, the whole apartheid kind of fell apart. Now, obviously, divestment campaign alone didn't drive this. The resistance on ground, that the movement itself, in addition to the divestment campaigns, drove the apartheid from falling apart. Now, encouraged by this, there was the BDS movement, which is the, where am I lost my place, sorry about that. So the BDS movement, which is the Palestinian Boycott, Divest, and Sanction movement that was launched in 2005, they're trying to do the exact same thing. They're hoping to end the apartheid over there. And this was started by refugee networks, women's organizations, professional organizations, but the goal is still the same, to recognize the fundamental human rights of Palestinians. The next, by the way, I did start off by saying that students lead this on campus grounds to get their universities divest. It sounds glamorous. It sounds like, you're heroes and you will be cheered on. Yeah, about 5 to 10 years after everything's gone down. But if you want to see what actually happens, look at what's happening in Columbia University and Vanderbilt University. It's not glamorous. It can get dangerous. So if you're embarking on journeys like that, know what you're getting yourself into. Next, we have consumer boycott campaigns. This can literally start on platforms like TikTok, not Facebook. That's for the older generation. But it's a matter of somebody complaining and getting the movement started. I'll talk about a few social movements that have occurred through consumer boycott campaigns, such as we talked about the South African and the BDS movement, and that's a 2-part movement. It's a divestment movement and consumer boycott. There was another boycott to companies linked to NRA, and the boycott was towards the companies linked, not towards NRA, but towards the companies linked to NRA in the wake of no, not Columbine. You would think Columbine would have done it, but no, it was Parkland in Florida.
Okay.
So after that happened, in the wake of that, the boycott started, and many companies did cut ties with NRA. There was another one which was called Grab Your Wallet campaign. This was targeted against any companies associated with Trump. So over like 70 companies cut ties with Trump, including like major companies such as Disney, Nordstrom, and Pepsi. There's Amazon boycotts because of their treatment of employees. That one hasn't hit as hard to Amazon because Amazon's still like growing crazy. There was the Black Lives Matter campaign in 2020, where it was hashtag Make Christmas Black. So this was actually a positive campaign. So it was more, instead of divest and don't buy, it geared towards more buy from Black-owned businesses, to promote small businesses. So this was more on the positive side of campaigns. The BDS movement, they actually had a recent campaign against Starbucks and McDonald's. This campaign was very successful. Starbucks lost $23.5 billion and McDonald's lost $24.5 billion in market cap. To be fair, Starbucks was targeted by two campaigns simultaneously in the same months. It was targeted by the BDS movement and it was targeted by the employees.
So it's like I'm a huge fan of like consumer boycott campaigns. Like it's a great movement out of like young people and just people getting out there in general. But
Old people too, man.
when we're seeing Starbucks lose 23 billion, that's just people are still buying coffee. You know, so are they not going to other companies that are also hurting animals and also exploiting workers in Central America? Like Dunkin' probably has the same practices as Starbucks. So at what point is it less of a going after direct companies and more of an institutional change? Because they'll just go to other suppliers. If they're not going to Amazon, they're going to Walmart.
The key, I'll get to it. I'll get to that very point. So good points you brought about animal control going after companies, and companies like organizations have done that. PETA is really big on like animal cruelty. They have gotten after Air France. They've gotten after House of Fraser. So Air France had to stop transport. They banned the transportation of monkeys. House of Fraser, they banned sale of fur. So these organizations have gone after multiple companies on an individual level. Because remember, these are individuals like you and I that are starting this consumer boycotts. So if you want to go on an institutional level, then you need larger numbers. So on that point, I'm going to do a quick recap. I need my notes for this one. So the quick recap is financial activism has made an impact. Right? They have changed corporate behavior. They have changed the market dynamics. They have improved labor practices. They have improved diversity and inclusion, improved human rights practices, animal rights, climate change, and promoted sustainable practices. Now, all of this done, all of this work done was by a small fraction of people working on this, right? Imagine what you can do with higher rates of participation. So I believe her name was Erica Chenoweth. She's a political scientist from Harvard University. She studied a lot of social movements and social campaigns, and she found that you only need 3.5% of an entire population to have the institutional impact that you're talking about. So a major social impact or a political impact. So what does that mean for United States of America? We need 12 million people. So you want that major shift in institution, you want that major shift in policy, you need 12 million people. Again, going back to TikTok, what does social media influence look like, right? If you're talking about a major influencer, they have over 1 million people following them. So if you get more than a dozen 13 to 15 social influencer to push a cause, you can probably get that 12 million people. So this is doable. The question is, are you up for it, right? Do you want to be the change that you want to see in the world? All right, so moving forward. Good point. I want to see a change. I want to see an institutional change. Why is financial institution important? Why is it important? It is extremely important because greedflation, monopolies, corporate and PAC money in politics. I told you we'll talk a little bit about politics, concentration of wealth, concentration of power. And our world is literally on fire. When we say climate change, this is not like we had over 10,000 wildfires in the United States alone this year, which burned through 1.75 million acres. And that is triple the 10-year average this year alone. So pick your reason why you want to be a financial or a social activist, because we got plenty of reasons to actually do this, right? So let's begin. Let's go through one by one. We talk about greedflation, right? When it comes to greedflation, You hear inflation a lot in your finance classes, in your economics classes. You just hear inflation, inflation, inflation. Well, what does inflation actually mean? Right? The basic definition given to you about inflation is the rise of prices in goods and services. Okay, fair enough. And then you hear inflation is down. Oh, I'm happy. Inflation is down. Yeah, it's down from 9%. That doesn't mean prices aren't going up again. The prices are still going up. They're just going up slower than they were before, but they're still going up. But I want to change this perspective real quick. We say inflation is down, good, great. It's not really the prices of goods and services going up. It's actually your labor, your talent, your skill being depreciated in the market. That's what I want you to reframe in your mind. So you have to work more to get that same piece of bread, to get that same carton of eggs. These are the same people that you're working for, right? They're like, no, now instead of 10 hours, you have to work 12 hours and I'll give you the same piece of bread. Okay, I get it. I would understand if it's a supply and demand issue. We learn about that in economics all the time. If it's a natural shift in supply and demand, fine, I will buy that. But is it a natural shift? Or is it corporations pushing the prices just to see how far they can push you? Right? So in 2022, corporations across the board bragged about their profits. They bragged about their profits. And that was the year we had the highest inflation, right? So prices were being marked up. And then people would say, well, oh, COVID. How much freaking toilet paper are you buying? Right? And what does that got to do with the price of milk? Like all of a sudden after COVID, people just started chugging down milk and eating all the eggs out there. What's happening with supply? So I can't pronounce this man's name from the life of me. Mark Jarsulit. He's the chief economist at American Progress. He did the research before I sent that to you a couple of years ago. And what he found is that prices were actually proportionally higher than the cost, right? If you're arguing that prices went up because cost of input went up, then you shouldn't have record profits. And if you're bragging about record profits, that means you pushed up the price more than the cost went up. You look at a basic income statement, if you're seeing the bottom line go up, what happened to the cost, right? So reflation is a real thing. Corporations are just trying to push this as far as they possibly can to see how much they can squeeze out of you, how much labor they can squeeze out of you.
Yeah, and another name is this Javaria. Robert Reich, who was Secretary of Labor.
Mhm.
And I can't remember what university he's affiliated with now, but he does a lot of work on corporate profit and the greedflation and stuff like that. And he's very active on social media.
I'll
So
look him up.
if you're not paying attention to him, he's kind of interesting to follow. And he's done a lot of media work. He put out a documentary a few years ago called Inequality for All, I think it was.
I believe that.
Yeah. So interesting guy.
You'll have to text me.
Oh, okay, I'll text you the name.
All right, let's talk about monopolies real quick. Another reason why you need to be financially active. I'm going to focus on just three things: food, shelter, healthcare. That's all I'm going to talk about, because you can't get more basic than this. You need to eat, you need shelter, and you need healthcare. With food, when you're talking about monopolies, once you have a monopoly, you don't have a choice to buy from anywhere else, right? So they control prices, they control quality. So you have given them the ultimate power at this point. You have to buy from them, and you have to do whatever you need to do to be able to buy from them. When it comes to the food industry, there is 4 or 5 firms that literally control the entire food chain supply. We're talking about from food, from seed to fertilizer, to cereal, to beer, to grocery store, slaughterhouses, the whole deal. 4 companies. That's dangerous, right? Because one, you don't have a say in price anymore. You can't say, well, I'm not going to buy X from you. I'm just going to go to the next store. Guess what? The price is the same, because it's the same guy or gal that's controlling both stores, now controlling nationwide stores, right? 1, you lost pricing control. 2, you lost quality control. 3, the small to mid-sized farmers, they lost control of what they produce, how much they can sell for. So there's price control on both sides, where they're controlling the farmers, they're controlling the public. They're pushing them down, and they're pushing the prices up on us and getting fat in the middle, right? And then there's also the workers. the workers in this industry that are getting pushed down by wages. So everybody loses when there's a monopoly. So we can move on to the housing. Concentration in the builders market has led to lower supply of housing being built or delayed housing. I had to wait a freaking year for my house to be built. I was pissed about that because interest rates went up like crazy. All right. But on top of fewer houses being built, they're allowing institutional investors to buy the houses. As of 2021, 24% of the single homes were bought by institutional investors. Like, all right, well, they buy it, they'll pretty it up and sell it back to you. No, they're not interested in selling it to you whatsoever. They're interested in renting it to you in a market where there's no rent control. Rent has gone up double, triple, quadrupled. It has been insane. So what does that do to the individual, right? One, you can get evicted. And two, you have to think about the idea that home ownership is a keystone towards generational wealth. And you're taking that away from Americans. So if you can't buy a house, you cannot build generational wealth. You will always depend on institutions. You will always depend on somebody else being able to provide housing and shelter for you, right? At this rate, we're looking at institutions owning about 40% within the next 5 years. That's insanity. So you're talking about no rent control, them owning, and then them being able to evict you. Mind you, homelessness is illegal in all but 2 states. So you can go to jail for not being able to afford housing. And then to make things worse, prisons can rent out their inmates, either for pennies on the dollar or for free. And if inmates refuse to do the hard labor, which is the agricultural labor going back to the food market, they can lose their parole or they can get harsh punishments, like solitary confinement, right? That's,
5 minutes.
I got 5 minutes. That's slavery right there. All right, that's your housing market. And then the healthcare is not prettier. A third of it is owned by 40 largest healthcare systems. What does that do to our health? You know, well, they can do anything with pharmaceutical prices. They can do anything with your healthcare system. So I gotta like speed this up. Summary, it's crap. All 3 of them. And then it keeps getting worse. I'm gonna give you a lot of bad story. Probably in the last minute, I'll give you the good story. $3.5 billion of donations from, not donations, they're buying out politicians. $3.5 billion of money, corporate money going into politics. Who do you think they're representing? Not you and me. I don't care if you're Republican, Libertarian, Democrat, Free-minded, whatever you want to call it. They're not representing you and I. They're representing this $3.5 billion. You and I don't hold them accountable. These corporations do. And this doesn't end at legislation. They're buying positions of power in U.S. State departments. So, you know, the people, the pharmaceutical lobbyist is at U.S. healthcare, you know? So these people are buying positions of power. And this cozy relationship, Matt, what'd you do? Thank you. All right. This cozy relationship is going round and round, right? The government is giving the corporations the tax break so they can buy more assets away from us and buy more, repurchase equity. Again, this shows you that 90% of the market, the entire financial market, is owned by top 10%. That's ridiculous. And when you go down, 0.6 is owned by 50%. The bottom 50% owns 0.6% of the market. And it gets uglier when you're talking about race division. 90% is owned by whites, 1.1 by black, 0.5 by Hispanic, and 9.4 by other, and the other. Wealth distribution, same story. 66% is owned by 10%. 30% is in between, and then the bottom owns 2.6%. So whoever controls the wealth controls the power, which means they dictate what policies are put into place that everybody has to deal with. So what the red line that you're seeing is the top 10% people. They control policy. If they want something, there's a higher likelihood of the policy being passed as opposed to the 50%. It gets worse when you get to the bottom 10%. They have no say. It's not even a flip of a coin for them if they want to have policy change that affects their daily life. Now, I told you, I'll give you enough bad news, now good news. I started off with the good news. I gave you the solution before I showed you the problem. Financial activism, right? Instead of voting every 2 to 4 years, what you need to do is vote every single day with the power of your money. So through investments, through consumer behavior, that's how you're going to make that institutional change. So you boycott large corporations that are putting in policy in place that is hurting everybody around the block. So what do? Go to your local coffee shop and don't go to Starbucks. Find a farmer's market instead of going to Walmart. So you don't just boycott Walmart, you boycott all large corporations. When I say corporations, I'm not even talking about the $1 million companies. $1 million companies is like the small players in the financial market. Those are your micro caps. I'm talking about the $500+ billion corporation. We don't have any business with them. And companies like that kill small businesses, they kill innovation, they kill the entrepreneurial spirit. We're at a business school. We teach entrepreneurship. So if that's what the corporations are killing, then we have no business with them. So you vote every single day. You get to shape the world that you live in. Make your choice. And scene. I don't know if you have time for questions. I'll hang around. So if you have class, feel free to go. But
Matt, can you kick up that last slide? So those of you that need to do the exit survey, please scan this, and anybody online, you can scan it. We can open up for questions, so anybody wants to ask questions. Thanks so much for a super thought-provoking discussion. I feel like I should be at the Federal Reserve when the speaker gets up there like, my views do not express the views of the, if a big corporation wants to give us money here, then we'll take it.
okay. At that point, we have business.
Any questions from anybody?
Javaria, have you looked at any of this from a historical perspective? For example, if you were to say that, when the US general population had like the best middle class life, if you will, quality of life, access to medical care, things like that, you'd have to figure out what era that is. And then
I would imagine that would be the 80s.
I would go back earlier than that probably. And then look at what the conditions were along these lines. And so what were the numbers in terms of who owned what wealth and distribution of various things like that? To kind of say, one of the easy ones is tax rate. Back the big line is back in the Eisenhower era, we actually taxed wealthy people without all the loopholes.
I have not looked at the historical, but I would imagine I kind of know the numbers.
I would guess too, but I'm just kind of curious to say that, if this is the set of circumstances that has brought us to this point now, what were the set of circumstances at a time in history that we considered the middle class to actually have a quality of life?
Sound money.
That's a
Sound money
good research.
preceded all of this.
I feel like that would be a good research paper. Yes.
How do you not oversaturate the market of boycotts? If you say we've got 13 to 15 of these people posting on TikTok about what things to boycott, how do we not oversaturate it to where, you've got college students that are just trying to find the cheapest option. You can't really rely on them to be a source for your 12 million. Your students in high school, unless they're spending on their parents' credit cards or debit cards, they really aren't in their own financial position of power, really. How do you reach out to the 12 million without oversaturating your market?
Can I add to that maybe? To complicate that with, we don't all have the same preferences and opinions and views. So whatever some going movement, there's going to be millions of people who don't agree with that at all and don't want to buy in intentionally. And so they could be pushing, having their own movement that this partly can oversaturate things with, competing ideologies, trying to put the same pressure on the same companies.
Who gets to be right?
So that's one thing. One, you need movement. You need enough support for the whatever movement that you're creating. And two, one of the things that I saw when I was going down the rabbit hole of doing all this research is sustainable targets. So enough to make them lose enough market cap to get their attention, and keep doing that over and over and over until corporate America gets the point to say that, hey, we have enough movement and we can target you if we want to. It's more about sending a message and getting them to fall in line. But the biggest part is, as he mentioned, getting that support. We do have contradicting views, so we might not all fall behind one kind of movement. The one thing that I can say across the board I've seen people fall behind is we need to get corporate money out of politics. That's one thing you can target and get plenty of people behind. Once we get that, you can have people have a diverse perspective. We just don't have a policy controlled by corporation.
So this like race to the bottom that led to a lot of these exploitations and, reasons why social activism has to exist in the first place is because it's economically efficient, right? What is stopping a corporation like Starbucks from in the moment saying, we're going to change, we're going to be better. And so everyone's like, okay, we're going to buy back in. They get their 23 billion back. What's going to stop them from just slowly over time going back to what was efficient? Because let's be real, sustainable practices right now aren't economically efficient to the point that that's why corporations aren't already doing them.
That just sounds like a toxic relationship. If you fool me like, twice, the third time I'm not coming back. And that's what has happened with Starbucks. People have sworn Starbucks off at this point. They said, I don't care, what the situation is, we're not coming back, we're done. Which I think is actually a great entrepreneurial opportunity, right? Just open up coffee shops at this point. If people are boycotting Starbucks, this is your opportunity to get into that market. And as you see these boycotts, remember, one side is like, yeah, you're doing these boycotts and you're hurting these companies. At the second time, it's business opportunities. So as business students, you need to like follow these trends and be like, all right, so if you're taking this down this company, you need an alternative option. And I will provide that alternative option for you. So what you mentioned, like, okay, fine, we buy back. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me.
Would you not also just reach a point to where of those 12 million, some of them would just get comfortable with the toxicity that they know?
And that's where we are at right now.
So people are okay knowing, like, I know how bad Starbucks is. I've accepted that. I'll just go donate money to charity elsewhere.
That's like putting bandages on a open wound. Like you're not gonna, it's gonna keep bleeding. It's eventually it's gonna come to a point where what corporations are gonna own us all. So that's what we're trying. We're not there yet, but we're getting dangerously close. So if you're comfortable, there's this saying that if you put a frog in hot boiling water, it will jump out. But if you put a frog in simmering water and then slowly turn up the temperature, it will die. Like it won't jump out, it will die. So we need to make sure we jump out of this boiling water.
I'm going to stop there because we're starting class.
Okay, I can continue talking to you like individually.
We need to stop. You guys can connect. Thanks everybody for an awesome experience. Have a great rest of the day. Thanks. I just got to race because I got class.
I understand.
They have to make the difference.